All right. I think we are here. Episode 9. How's
And we're
everybody doing
alive.
today?
Living the dream. You're going to hear ducks, geese,
I
and
know
birds all around me today.
I
I
was
know
gonna say
Brian's
it's
Brian's chilling.
it's looking pretty beautiful out there.
That's the best virtual background I've ever seen, Brian.
Nice.
All right. We got a pretty good list of topics this one, right? So the first one, it looks like Google's security team has found a expert level counterterrorism hacking operation and accidentally exposed them, if you will. Um, so you kind of look at this, right? It's a Google security team publicly exposed a 9-month hacking operation, with moves to kind of shut this down. Decision was made to, do this. It looks like it was potentially a Western kind of organization, certain kind of trademarks or, sophistication around what that would look like. And it looks like it was exploiting 11 zero-day vulnerabilities over a period of 9 months, and then various software. So, platforms, OSs. What are you guys' kind of thoughts on this, right? I mean, someone like Google taking that decision to just do this without, maybe a little more research on things. I mean, there's kind of definitely people looking at this from both sides, right?
Yeah, and even internally, I know it's been very divisive over there, as a lot of people were of the stance that it shouldn't have been released, and a lot of other people thought that it should be, the information and data should be released to kind of aid in the process. But interestingly enough, no technical details have been released just yet. We know they were using a watering hole attack, which means that they infected a site that was being used regularly by the targets. So sophistication was obviously there, but yeah, it's interesting to see how much controversy is being brought up regarding the disclosure of the tactics and the attempts. So yeah, no, I think from a personally speaking, I think it's I probably subscribe more to probably a need to know basis, informing the individual stakeholders that should be involved and should be aware of this. But at a public disclosure level, I think they may have played it safe by not disclosing every detail about the event.
Yeah, definitely.
Brian's glitching a little bit there.
Is he?
Uh-oh, am I frozen?
Yeah,
I'm
there we
still
go.
here.
Oh, we're good now. Okay, there we go. We see you now. You're moving. You got slow for a second.
Yeah.
Good
Hear
old
the
hotel
ducks.
Wi-Fi. What can you say?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it brings up good points, right? It's kind of like, like who's really in charge of all this? Meaning, like who makes the ultimate decision, like when to disclose, when not to disclose. I mean, there's so much like discretionary, things around these things now, and they're happening, so often. And we have a few more to kind of touch upon, but it's really like, is it up to the shareholders? Like, is it best interest of the public? I mean, but also, from a military operations standpoint, secrecy and silence is key in these things. And there's been other um, you know, acts of these where missions or whatnot were exposed and potentially ruin the mission, if you will, or slow things down. So yeah, it's very interesting to kind of see someone like Google who taking a stance on this, and whether it's right or wrong, it's more opinion based. And I think, Sammy, to your point, not releasing every little bit of detail in this one probably is key. And but if you look at it compared to other attacks where we do see a ton of detail, it makes you kind of think it was like, hey, yeah, that was somewhat friendly. Let's not go into detail about what was actually found, if you will.
Yeah, and I guess it really just depends on what thought process you prescribe to, because I can see where a lot of people would be disgruntled by that disclosure because, in a sense, they feel that it compromises national security, because at the end of the day, it was an anti-terrorism organization or group. But at the same note, people feel that it's well within their Google's rights to be able to disclose something like this. So again, like you were kind of mentioning, it's like who are the stakeholders that ultimately get the say in this, and is there a specific regulation around this? Which I know people don't really like regulation in our industry, but should there be a regulation around the disclosure of these types of incidents, right? Because I'm sure this was not the first and likely not the last time something of this nature has happened.
Yeah.
No, I think you're going to see more and more of that, right? We're going to see more laws, more regulation, compliance, things like that pop up due to these type of events that have occurred.
Yeah, it's almost like
And
this future cyber, Geneva Convention type of thing going on is what we're getting into, I think.
I mean, what are the rules of engagement in this whole topic of attack back and all these other type of
right.
Mhm.
things? Where's all
A
that going to
common
end up
theme we
landing?
have here.
Yeah, and
Yep.
like what are the metrics that we need to look into that indicate, hey, this needs to be disclosed, or who are the entities that have to be involved for this to be taken to a public level, right? These are kind of the questions that are coming up, and I'm sure we'll answer to or look at more details today when we talk about some of the other disclosure related issues that we're seeing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Looks like next up we have Pwn to Own. So there was quite a few. I don't know if you want to call them winners or losers. I kind of have my opinions on these, right? So it looks like Windows, Ubuntu, Zoom, Safari, Exchange. Shocking on that one. Quite a few highlights on this one, right? Lots of good money being paid out to successful exploitations. Me personally, I think these types of events are great. It kind of really puts a lot of focus on the community and kind of really raise awareness and actually do what's right and fix some of these severe problems, and paying out the so-called good guys, if you will, and good girls out there that are doing these things, and bringing these exploits to light, and companies really kind of owning and paying up for these these exploits being shown in the wild, so to speak. So I think these things are great. I love kind of seeing these things, and to me it's just makes things better in the whole community and for the software we use every day for the most part.
Yeah, I'd rather see these type of events than what I've seen on Reddit in the last month was this guy that found a vulnerability, reported it, and got a letter from the legal department
Right.
saying that he was violating the terms of service, and all he was trying to
Wow.
do was help out. So I would rather see these type of events come out, help make the software more secure and find these vulnerabilities in these holes, because chances are somebody else already knew about the hole or the vulnerability. I mean, we're seeing that with Exchange, with more and more vulnerabilities
Yeah.
coming to light in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. And by the way, shout out to Elisa Assange, who made history as being the first woman to win Pwn to Own. So that was very exciting. I think she only got a partial award because apparently the issue had been reported prior, but it's cool that she was able to weaponize and exploit it. So still, congrats to her. That's very exciting. And to you guys' point, yeah, I mean, this is a healthy way to kind of stimulate this growth and this research in the industry without having it be a malicious kind of behavior. So I hope we see more of this moving into the future, and the participants like Elisa Assange, providing even more meaningful contributions.
Yeah, I think like these types of events hopefully kind of bring in say fresh talent, but like new people and maybe like a younger generation kind of getting into this side of the thing and look at it as a way to potentially make some good money doing this, right? And I think for some of these larger customers like say a Microsoft or Zoom, a few $100,000 to patch these exploits now is should be like nothing to them. When you look at if these things were to go in the wild and clean up and damage control and PR and everything like that. So it's cheaper to pay this out than it is some of these insurance policies. So I think it's cool to see, and hope we see a lot more of these things in the future. And to your point, Brian, like companies kind of embracing like, hey, that's great. You found this. Like, thanks for telling me. And not just like getting real nasty back and threatening legal, because that's how you piss people off. And they say, okay, watch this, and just release everything and have at it. I've seen some issues like that in the past too, where companies or individuals have found things and they've given fair warning, to a company saying like, hey, like, I'm giving you guys like 60 plus days, and they don't even acknowledge it. And then just poof, they release things. And, I think we've seen that in the past happen here. So these types of things are really, really cool to see.
Yeah, and then you can see groups and firms forming out of this because of all those bug bounties that they can collect and actually making a business out of it.
Yeah.
That's an
Correct.
interesting model overall as well.
Yeah, and I was going to mention, if you had the scale and the capability, establishing some kind of internal bug bounty program, kind of like how Google has their bug bounty program, would or their vulnerability reward program, I should say, it could be very beneficial or valuable to your organization. So
Yeah.
I think some
So-
kind of implementation would be good. Yeah.
Here's an interesting thought or question to pose back to you guys. Should you just do bug bounties and not have a QA group for security? Or should you do both or one or the other? What do you guys think about that?
I'll let Sammy answer, then I'll go.
Well, I'm going to take the gray area answer here. I really do think it's a combination of both, right? Because having your own kind of internal QA will provide a certain set of insight as they have intimacy into the environment. They understand the environment. However, getting that third party set of eyes can help identify issues and vulnerabilities that may not be aware when you're kind of in the niche, in the software itself or the systems itself. So yeah, a combination of the two seems to me to be like an optimal. And what that percentage is, how much of one or the other is, it will be variable or dependent. But I don't think it's completely. I don't think it's black and white where it's completely one or the other.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Right? I mean, I think there's certain intricacies that a QA team is going to know, like about the actual company, kind of how they work, and more like a business process flow and things like that. And obviously, security is an important wrapper around that. But I don't think you can have just one or the other because like what if the opposite happens and you say, hey, I don't want to QA it, and your code just crashes all the time because it's not even up. So it's like, well, if you can't even serve your customers, then security doesn't even matter at that point almost, in certain ways. So definitely a hybrid approach, but it's good to see these kind of QA and kind of bug bounty programs working essentially together, right? So
yeah, and not to mention you can't expose everything publicly. So in a sense, when you have these programs, the people operating against them are kind of doing it from like a black box perspective. Whereas when you're talking about an internal QA team, they may have access to all of that data, which is not stored publicly, and as a result can do a lot more intensive code reviews and such to kind of identify those vulnerabilities. So no, I definitely think you're right. Hybrid combination is probably the optimal approach here.
Yeah, I think if you don't do the hybrid, you're going to get yourself in trouble because you're
Correct.
going to leave those simple, easy vulnerabilities open without verifying them. And then you're just asking for trouble at that point. So there's that fine balance, right? You're not just outsourcing it to the bug bounty program at all, but you're using them for that advanced knowledge and skill to hack into your software.
Yeah, it's kind of like that like niche level. Hey, really kind of poke and prod and see if you can get in, right? So
and if you really want to add a third layer to it, you can add third-party vendors who do things from a white box perspective and kind of look at what your internal QA team would be looking at, but providing a second set of eyes with maybe a little bit more expertise as they perhaps would spend more time on a daily basis doing these kinds of reviews for various environments. So they may have different perspective as well. So maybe there even is that third pillar there to add to a holistic kind of bug bounty, vulnerability review, vulnerability management program.
Yeah, we're going to see more of this as software really, takes over. I mean, it has been for a long time, and there's so much different, code out there and programs that do various things now that, I mean, software is it's everywhere and touches every part of our life. So that it's, becomes this never-ending battle of QA and check and recheck, and you kind of how you do your software development life cycles and things like that. So it's also, I mean, like time to market, right? I mean, sometimes it's like, hey, I'm building a new company, a new product. My goal is to launch. I know it's going to be buggy, but I got to get it out there. So there's all kinds of other outside factors, but it's good to see that companies are taking it serious, or some of them are taking it serious, right? All right. The federal chair deems cybersecurity as a top threat for the financial sector. This one's kind of coming interesting, right? I mean, if you think about kind of how our lives are so digital now, and everything is now becoming cashless from COVID and this change shortage, if you will, no matter what you think of it, and kind of moving everything towards touchless, and whether it's crypto from a payment perspective, and Zelle, all these types of digital payment systems, how much we rely on them, how critical these things become. I mean, if you think about someone like say like an American Express or Visa, prime targets for going after, right? I mean, if you can cripple someone spying things, across the nation and the world, that's a massive kind of impact to, what we're seeing in a different type of attack that could cause a lot of havoc and chaos, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see, how these companies kind of come out of this and, what they're being targeted for, how they're really kind of ramping up to handle, this kind of new modern world we're living in with everything going, paymentless, if you will, or touchless and payment systems, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And then another factor to it too is again going back to kind of the topic of regulation. Because of that or that implied risk, there has been a lot more discussion surrounding the disclosure of cyber incidents in these companies, and that could actually. And the intent there is to really impact the stability of the financial sector, and make sure that key portions of the organizations are actually complying to these things. Because I think right now is a big problem is the underreporting of events, and therefore without that reporting, it's difficult to learn from these experiences when they do happen. So now I think they're expanding or attempting to expand regulations to not only just financial institutions but the banking organizations themselves. And actually, I think it was like a excuse me, a 36-hour. They're trying to push a 36-hour mandate on any kind of incident that involves system outages, data breaches. So yeah, I mean, it's the push to get serious about this is definitely there. How long adoption will be is, I think that'll be up for a matter of debate. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, Brian, on the regulations surrounding the financial institutions? I know people already feel inundated with regulatory compliance, but is it necessary? Is it a necessary evil?
I would say a lot of the finance companies that I know are pretty well mature in their security today, if you will, right? So they already have a lot of segmentation. They have a lot of this stuff in place. So, I mean, if the breach doesn't fit the threshold of reporting, then they shouldn't have to report it, right? So if you're under the threshold of whatever that is, because you have the stuff in place, but some people say it's like sweeping it underneath the rug, if you will, by not reporting it. And then I think there's a lot of risk out there right now in the market. The market overall is, overinflated to some degree, in my opinion, into where it is. And if you look at things like Bitcoin and people getting involved in all of that and not understanding risk, and then hiding those currencies, right, and not know who's trading them and all that type of stuff, like that's one of the big concerns that I keep hearing. Because unlike, the stock market, they track every transaction you ever do, right? So that's how they find the insider trading and all the different things that go on inside organizations. And that's a risk to a business, right? And so when you get out to the whole Bitcoin side or Ethereum and all the different cryptocurrencies, that changes all that as well. But back to the compliance and the cybersecurity stuff overall, I guess there's that fine line that you still have to find, like what needs to really be reported and what doesn't. I don't know about you guys, but all the financial institutions I've worked with seem to have fairly mature risk departments, and cybersecurity tends to go underneath risk. And I think they've got that stuff down pretty well, in my opinion. I think it's the consumer that has to more or less worry, like you were talking earlier, Derek, with those instant transfers. Venmo, bam, I can have the money instantly. I don't have to wait for it to clear through the ACH transaction or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, this is, to your point about, most financials that we work with and see, they have very, mature programs across the board, especially around risk and cybersecurity, like you said. So this is going to be now more about, hey, what are the new regulations I got to follow? How do I report to like my users, meaning like us as consumers, right? So there's always that kind of gray area of like micromanaging, like, oh, if you had a potential issue for an hour, like, do you report it? You're kind of getting aggressive there. But I think the new 36-hour window and things like that about getting the information out. So, I mean, it's kind of like like you said, Sammy, earlier, that the theme of our kind of show today is, when do you say something? What do you say? How do you say it? Things like that. So it's always this kind of gray area. There's no really right or wrong answer because everything's a little bit different, so but yeah, I think like you're saying also too about tracking everything, big government, if you will, and just corporations kind of like having that control and really being able to see kind of what's going on where. And that understanding of the flow of money, if you will, is pretty critical, right, for a lot of reasons. So it makes it prime target too, so it's not going to go anywhere, that's for sure.
Yeah, it really is a super interesting topic, because it's like, what, on one hand you have the regulation of the transactions themselves, and then on the other hand you have the systems which store, process, and transmit this data. And so you kind of look to them and it's like, okay, well, has the highest risk of compromise? And if it's the system, then you start to look into things like cryptocurrency may actually seem appealing, as it's running on a distributed system of nodes on using a peer-to-peer methodology. Whereas if the concern is more towards like insider trading and the illegal actions or the illegal
Right.
behavior of individuals, then it's like, maybe we need to have more transparent systems, right? So yeah, it's an interesting. I think, again, there's many different ways to subscribe to it, but ultimately I think these regulations our policymakers are really trying to push towards a proactive approach. I think that's what I'm kind of trying to get at, what I'm kind of getting out of all of this. And it's a balancing act, and I'm curious to see where we land. But at the end of the day, I think that push towards a more proactive approach towards security and breaches is a good thing, despite some of the nuances that we're still trying to figure out along the way.
We can always go back to just carrying cash around, coins, and writing checks. And have at it, man.
Get some gold bars, huh?
Yeah.
Start trading courses.
Well, I picked up
go and go from there.
An interesting little thing too, though, with the cryptocurrency, right? So like if you lose your password or your wallet, it's gone. You can't get it back. With a bank, I can go back and have them reset my online password, right? Answer some challenge questions or go and show my picture ID, and then they'll issue that password reset. So that's another interesting piece of the pie too that still needs to be figured out from a regulation standpoint.
Yeah.
How do you protect all that?
It's not insured. It's not backed up. It's like we could spend a whole show talking about that type of stuff too, right? And the whole security aspect of it, not so much pros and cons, but how it really works under the hood, right? So
yeah, and it really makes you wonder. Again, this is probably we'll have to do a whole show on this, but it really does make you wonder what control or what ability regulators would even be able to have on something like that, because it's not like they own the systems. They can't revert back to a previous state. So that relationship is going to be very, very interesting moving into the next decade, I would say, particularly because of just the massive amount of attention that's being given globally. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we have some more, data leakage. Not really sure I want to call it data leakage, but more data scraping, right?
Right.
So 500 million for LinkedIn and another 500 and something million for Facebook. This one's a little interesting because it's not really like a breach, right? It wasn't like, hey, I have all this information. It seems like it was really, manipulating, if you will, the various kind of what was there publicly through the APIs or whatnot, and just kind of gathering all this intel, if you will, and what was kind of publicly made available or somewhat publicly made available. But it gives you an interesting kind of, I would say, target list now to kind of use this as, I don't know, Sammy, like some open source intelligence, especially from like LinkedIn perspective, I think, right? If you have, you got 500 million users, probably a lot of top C-levels, a lot of people in certain industries, and it can really kind of help I would say your social engineering aspects of going after some people now and things like that. So, it becomes this issue of how much, in my opinion, like how much privacy we give up to some of these social media companies and just say like, yeah, here you go, like have at it. I know Facebook has kind of gotten a lot of flack over the years and kind of just, I don't want to say not caring, but, taking it very relaxed, and, kind of comes back to, again, is, do I disclose? Do I not disclose? And it's like, okay, well, this didn't check my box specifically. I'm not going to disclose it. And, you might agree, you might disagree, but again, like who's the ultimate decision maker, and, when do you disclose and things like that. So yeah, it's another interesting one about more not quite PII, but in some cases PII data coming out about individuals.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly right. I think that data will definitely be used to launch further kind of social engineering phishing attacks. I'm not sure the complete contents of the data, but if it has any kind of identifiable information about the vendors that these individuals work with or the softwares they use, then certainly, this is basically just a comprehensive list of possible techniques that you can leverage against, up to sounds like 500 million users. So. And to your point about the way these companies are, and back to the theme of the podcast today, which is disclosure. It seems like, and I kind of get the stance of security through obscurity, right? Because if you don't disclose the breach, the hackers don't necessarily know about it, at least the low-level hackers, and then perhaps you can fix the issue before it's actually ever disclosed. I know that's what Valve is kind of their approach is, and we'll talk about their issue later today. And then therefore, you can remediate it before it's actually being exploited regularly in the wild. Like, it makes you wonder, like, if nobody knew about the exchange hack, how many people would be using the exchange hack regularly? So it's an interesting thought process to subscribe to, but if you end up being lazy on the back end and not actually taking care of the issue, which I think some companies end up doing that, you're not actually preventing anything. You're just leaving your attack surface wider, and you may be able to write it off as security through obscurity, but only for so long if you're not actually remediating the issue. So yeah, it's a really interesting mindset, and from Facebook's perspective, I think it probably would have been better to let their users know about the compromise. But I can see, I guess, where their stance is.
Well, when it's publicly facing information and had your profile set to public, I mean, I don't know what you're supposed to do. I hate to tell you, but your data is already out there. If you've ever submitted your name, address, and date of birth on any website and you didn't read the terms of service, I guarantee you they sold your data. And some data aggregator already has all that information. So I think the only thing that maybe more they could get out of it is like reasoning out questions, your security questions and things like that to challenge to reset passwords and things like that. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot of people that just keep a little, like, whether it's their LastPass or whatever, off on the side, and they make up fake questions to answer for every website, and they just store that in that repository so that it's not the same questions over and over, right? I mean, everybody knows your mother's maiden name. You can go look it up. It's right there in some Google database, right?
Totally.
What's your dog's name again, Brian? I gotta write this down.
Exactly. Well, right now she's in timeout. She's destroyed my house. The dog sitter sent some pictures last night. Oops. She got into a lot of good stuff.
Oh,
no. Temper tantrum because you're gone.
That's right.
Oh, that's funny.
It's Mr. Snuffles, by the way, for anybody listening.
Yeah, Mr. Snuffles. It's Buddy.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. But yeah, I think you bring up a good point, right? I mean, a lot of times this stuff is, hey, I agree to basically have my information sold or reused, whatever terminology you want to use, and people just like click things and move on. And I think the social media kind of game has really kind of shown this, that your privacy is kind of what you're giving up and in your data for whatever, connecting with your friends, watching videos, being on the platform, so to speak. So it's kind of like this the new currency almost is like your data and your privacy. It's worth its weight in gold or Bitcoin now, depending how you want to look at that, right? I mean, there's so much.
Yeah.
Like, again, that could be a whole other topic in itself, is what you're really giving up when you go online, and what these social media platforms know about you, right? And understand your habits and whatnot. So I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, this stuff wasn't, like I said, this major really breach. It was more just, hey, aggregating data that's kind of already out there, and unfortunately probably making it easier for open source intelligence to gather in their next spear phishing campaign. So be on the lookout.
Yeah. Gmail, Facebook, LinkedIn, they're not free. They're making money off of you. Yeah. They couldn't operate without that. So it's all selling the data and the aggregation of the ads and everything else. I mean, that's why you see Facebook arguing against Apple in this new update that's coming out against
Yeah.
scrambling all the data, essentially. So,
Yep. That could
yeah.
be that's going to be an interesting one to kind of watch unfold as well. You kind of have two industry giants going about it for very different reasons. That's one to keep an eye on for sure. Okay, I think we have our last topic, which is the Valve Source Engine vulnerability. I don't know, Sammy, do you want to kind of walk us through that one?
Yeah. Basically, it was a vulnerability released on the 10th. When a Source Engine game is installed, allows remote authenticated users to execute arbitrary code because of a buffer overflow that occurs from a Steam invite after just a single click. And for those of you that don't know, a Steam invite is just typically a one-liner, and generally speaking is kind of innocuous. So the fact that they were able to weaponize it's pretty intense, because it's something that gamers do regularly is send these invitation links to one another. So one of the crazy things about this is the reverse engineer who had discovered the vulnerability had notified Valve, and again, this is going to circle back to our theme of the day. And Valve kind of had just allegedly had sat on this for up to a year and hadn't actually responded to them. And so there is still no report on whether this vulnerability has been patched or not, or what Valve actually intends to do about it. But with Valve, they are known to have a security through obscurity type program. So this may be within their kind of policy to not disclose this, and perhaps they're working on a fix before they actually mention anything public.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one, right? I mean, if it's up to a year, I mean, it's a pretty long time, right? I mean, if you look at it, like in my opinion, if this was a different company, like say a Microsoft, well, actually Microsoft's probably a bad example. They have stuff out there for forever, but yeah, I mean, that's just a long time to maybe potentially even like ignore it, right? Or like not take it too serious. And I think with people doing like gaming is so huge right now, and professional level, and everyone kind of being at home, I'm sure it's taken a massive uptick in community and users. And I think to your point, if it's super easy to exploit, whether it's been exploited or not, doesn't mean that it could happen like tomorrow and become the next, hey, yeah, 1 million subscribers for Valve and whatever else have been compromised with these one-click things. And I can see like, hey, like you're trying to share a game with your buddy or something, and then click the link. You don't think too much about it. Like, okay, I trust a person, and then
Correct.
it's just social engineering and phishing in a different platform, right? Instead of maybe email, it's just like Discord or whatever the popular platforms are nowadays. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of like, hey, that's a pretty long time. Like some type of acknowledgement would be good, but again, the theme is to disclose or not, like not to disclose at this point. So yeah, I mean, it comes back to who ultimately decides when things get patched, or how we disclose, and how do we come back to our community and kind of bring these things up to our user base.
Yeah, you just said it, trust, right? Like that's. Oh.
Yeah.
It got on some list to be remediated, right? So it's feature versus functionality, security piece of the pie. So I'm sure there's thousands of other items on there that need to be remediated as well. So which one, right?
Yep.
That's kind of what
one
these things
probably
come
makes
down
money. One necessarily doesn't make money directly. So yeah, I mean, it comes back to that, going back to that initial conversation, like, hey, if I have to get my application out quicker to market because I want to beat my competitor, or, I need to make profit, or, launch my widget, if you will, speed's key. And a lot of times security kind of gets, pushed back a little bit. But I think hopefully we're seeing, a lot of companies kind of somewhat pump the brakes and say, hey, no, let's just not release really, really bad buggy code. And it goes back to our QA versus no QA conversation, right? So yeah. I think you had something, Sammy, you were gonna
Our next
say?
episode.
Oh yeah, no. Go ahead.
Coming in delayed.
Yeah.
No, I was just gonna mention to Derek's point earlier. You know, he mentioned trust, right? And I think that's what makes this one particularly so novel. Is just you expect to receive these links, right? And you don't expect to scrutinize your friends. So it's just it's in and of itself. It has that trust layer built in. The exploitation of that trust layer built in. So I just thought that was a very novel feature of this bug, and you know, it just shows the level of sophistication as of the attackers. But that's all. Just wanted to mention that.
Nice. Well, my cliffhanger
You
is
can-
I can't talk about the FBI being involved in the whole Microsoft breach next time. So that's our cliffhanger, to hit that
Yep.
subscribe button so that you know next time what's going with
Yeah, we
that.
can definitely cover that one. There's going to be that's a very interesting one for sure. So look forward to discussing that with everybody next week or next time on the show. So, all right. Well, I think that's all we have, everybody. So, you know, thanks for tuning in. As Brian said, smash that subscribe button. You know, like us, you know, share us. We appreciate it. And yeah, wherever we're putting it, you know, I don't know, we'll kind of do this and we'll figure it out. So yeah, thanks everybody, and have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.